There is a primal scream rising on this planet, and as many would argue, from this planet. Think of it as a boiling point of pain and disconnection, a culmination of disappointment, if you will, that we are unwilling, or even more concerning, that we are incapable of closing the gap between knowing better and doing better. In my work with young people, I hear a common refrain: I'm not suicidal, but I'm not sure I want to be here anymore. This is a clarion call that something's got to give. The New York Times refers to this slow death of the human condition as a pandemic of loneliness. Mental health practitioners refer to it as a crisis of global proportions, leading to ever-increasing rates of suicide, self-harm, addictions of all sorts, violence against others, and a population increasingly dependent on mood-stabilizing drugs just to function. Bottom line, we are struggling to exist in a world our nervous systems were not designed for. To exist in a perpetual state of fight or flight is the greatest theft of our human experience. We're being robbed of our potential to live a life of peace and harmony. Is there a way out of this path of self-annihilation and mutual destruction? I believe there is. My hypothesis is that if we are willing to go to school on our wounding, to remove shame and blame from our past, to find grace in all that has come before, and with even greater courage apply a lens of love to the present moment, our future can be radically and beautifully different from our past. Our failure to learn from our past forever binds us to the suffering of our ancestors. Our inability to meet this pain with compassion and wisdom is a key point of frustration for many. That frustration is the catalyst for this podcast. The Primal Scream podcast is an ongoing conversation with ordinary folks who have met their primal scream head-on and turned it into a powerful catalyst for change in their lives. They've stepped away from the performative expectations placed on them by their family and/or society, despite encountering resistance from within and external constraints along the way, leaving behind both the trauma of their story and the trauma drama that often ensues. Change is hard, but as these beautiful humans share their stories, we learn the intimacy of change is the opening to a life well lived. If you are feeling the existential dread of being alive on the planet at this time, you are not alone. If you're exhausted by the simple act of just being here, you are not alone. As you listen to these storytellers reveal their raw and real journeys to wholeness, it is our hope that you will find courage to do the same. Is there one message to take away from each of these podcasts? I believe there is, and it is simply this: you are not crazy, and you are not alone. Hi, this is Edie Oz. Welcome back to the Primal Scream podcast. I am here with my mentor and my guide and my dear friend and sister in all things. This is Reda Rackley, and as you can see, she's an amazing artist of primal art. Really, and when I think about it, when I think about the essence of your primalness, I recognize that it does come through your art. And with each of these interviews, Rita, I always start off with the sort of the salvo, and then we just play from there. And the opening question is, what does the term primal scream mean to you? And there are no limits on what you say next.
Well, the very first thought that comes up, Edie, is the birth cry. You know, when we first come into this world and we take our first breath, that to me is the primal scream party. The birth cry. That we made it from one dimension into this dimension. And it's also a battle cry. It's a battle cry. And you know, I've said this thing to women for years. There's a holy howl in every woman I have ever met.
Yeah.
And part of my journey is to create space, sacred space for that holy howl, the primal scream to erupt, because it's not just my primal scream. It's my mother's, my grandmother's, my great, 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 great grandmother's. It's all of the shit that could never be said. And you finally have a moment in your life where, like Pele, it erupts. So it's like, it's all of that for me.
Yes. And I'm curious about if you look back over the arc of your life, was there a moment where that scream came through you in a way that I love that is it an arrival scream? Is it a threshold scream? I mean, to me, I have the sense that the primal scream is a marker of a before and an afterness of who we are. And so can you relate to that in your own life? And as you think back, and maybe there have been multiple iterations of that along the way.
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. The first memory that comes up from that question is through dance and drumming. African dance, African drumming, where some portal got opened in my body and I ended up being on the floor like a snake and moving like a snake. And then this sound that I don't, it was from another time, another place, came up and out of me. It was primal. It was primal. And I knew it was more than just me. It was, like I say, a billion ancestors coming through me. So that's the first memory of that threshold moment of that our bodies have this potential to create, like Pele, like you go through this destruction and then something opens up. And so that's the first memory.
Were you in Africa at that point?
Yeah. No, I was dancing, I think, with my teacher, Tito Sampa, way back when. And a small group of us. He was a Congolese master drummer. And it's like being possessed in a way. It was like being possessed by something so much bigger than me. And I could see in Tito's eyes, like he went, okay, all right. I've seen this before, right. My mother.
So it is. It's like a life force energy unexpressed finally finds a pathway, a gauntlet through which it can release. And so it birthed something. Can you recognize what it birthed in you?
That there's a mystery far greater than we can fathom. And, I call it the hollow bone on so many levels. When we get out of our way and we invoke and invite that mystery to come through us, then, these strange paintings start coming through and all of these downloads happen. And so it's an exciting way to live. So in a way, it gave birth to who the hell I am today. And my madness and my permission to dance in that mystery and to dance with others in that mystery and invite it and invoke it. And, I create ritual space for people to have, women specifically, to have that primal scream. And it's one of the most powerful things I have ever witnessed in my life when women tap into that and have permission to have that primal scream.
I have experienced the primal scream, and I talk about this in some earlier episodes, but in the beginning it felt like I was releasing my repressed voice, my repressed energy, and I have this sense like you of my mother, my grandmothers, and all the way, and even at my father. I mean, we don't often acknowledge that the masculine also has a primal scream. Oftentimes, it is expressed through rage and violence out into the world, where the feminine is often inwardly expressed, and we see that manifest in depression and anxiety and a loss of vitality for the human experience. We just become sort of numb to the possibilities of our lives. And so in holding space for women, as you do so beautifully, and I've been the recipient of many opportunities to be in that space with you, you've witnessed this, and it is out of body, but it is fully embodied out of body, right? Like, it has really interesting characteristics of both being in the physical form, but beyond our understanding. It is the sound of the universe coming through us fully. Yeah.
It's for women, for me, it's like witnessing them giving birth to themselves again.
Amen. Yeah.
It's a rebirthing. It's a rebirthing. It's a wailing.
Right.
It's keening, deep grief, like the deepest grief. But then when you get to that place of that primal scream, you've taken all of the dams down in the body and the river's just going to the ocean. And a lot of times where I do these primal scream rituals are at the ocean, because the ocean can hold that energy, can hold the noise, can hold the power. And so it's, part of the ritual work. I've done this work at my home where women tap into that primal scream and please show up a few times, because when it wakes up this world and the other world, it's terrifying to those in this world. And of course, they think somebody could be being hurt or somebody, is in danger. But it's actually eating very few places that I know, and because my work is women, I'm going to say women can go to really get to that place. You're one of those places. And it's, it is a blessing to be safe enough and protected enough.
I teased up a little bit your time in Africa with Malidoma Some and keening. I had been aware of keening. It's kind of a Celtic thing too. Like but we don't talk about the ritual of transitions, the ritual of grief that we carry. One of my breakthrough moments with my primal scream was once I felt like I had released all of my pent up energy, then it took me to the cosmos, and I felt like I was tapping into the collective grief, and that there are people that are within an indigenous society whose work it is to help others. Can you speak to that?
It's absolutely true. When I was in the village in Dano, Burkina Faso, where Malidoma's people are, somebody had crossed over, and it was like all of a sudden you heard this, I'm not going to be able to reproduce it, but this, like the sound, and everybody stopped because they knew somebody had just died. Not continue the same thing that you were doing. The ritual begins. And then that call, it's kind of like the fire department. When the fire department puts out the call, that first thing, and all the firemen have to come to the fire department. It's the same. All of the keeners are coming to the village now. And they're the ones who open the grief gates, and they're in ritual for days, and the drumming begins and the dancing begins. And it is a ritual that goes on for days. And it's a place for the community to come together and grieve. They don't have to grieve by themselves. Take this grief and bury it inside. And there's dancing, and there's all of it. There's the crying, the dancing, but it's to grieve the dead and to send them into the other world.
Yes, and at this, and my brain also went to the psychologist's view of that would be it is a somatic release of the sadness and the loss and the grief and the anger and whatever holding we've had about a given person and unresolved, unrequited, unmetness of that relationship. If we don't take the time to release that, we end up holding it, repressing it, and it becomes part of our somatic experience. Our bodies carry that in at a cellular level. So fascinating that both an indigenous view, and I see this more and more in our sort of finally beginning to dive into the mystery of our ancient teachers. There is a science, a wisdom underneath that brings the metaphysical and the physical into alignment with each other.
Absolutely.
That this scream, this and it's I can imagine somebody calling the police if they heard that sound. Like that's a death cry.
Yeah.
That's a blood curdling scream.
It is. And there were certain songs in Ireland, and the Celtic people, the Keeners. I mean, this was a very sacred position in the community. They had these, the ballads, the chants that the Keeners would sing, and that would open up the grief gateways for the community. So I think it's really important to say, this isn't my grief, and it's my grief, but it's also a communal grief. And so much of Maladoma's work when he came to this country was creating grief rituals. And I was a part of that. I helped facilitate a part of it. And, these are people that never in a billion years had ever done communal grief rituals. And you had some people that just, they wanted to jump into the river, and you had to have gatekeepers to keep these people from, like jumping into the fires, because it was finally something got released that had never had an opportunity to be released. And two, keening got outlawed.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Ireland by the Catholic Church, not now, but way back when.
And they were afraid of it because
they were afraid of it because they didn't want these old crone women to have that much power in the village and in the community, and they outlawed the keening rituals.
Anything that they and I think of the Salem witch trials, any place where women express their full power, the church could not handle that, right?
Yes, which we're seeing it right now today.
All right, so let's jump into today. My hypothesis, and the reason I started this podcast, was that I feel like we are reaching a crescendo of agony, a culmination of unmet ancestral grief, finally landing on the shoulders of. We now have 7 generations alive on this planet. And this is the first time we've ever had 7 generations all at the same time because of our lifespan. And I think of the indigenous model of making choices that benefit 7 generations. This feels to me, my sort of metaphysical take on the moment, is that what's happening right now across the planet is the birthing of a new story. And that there are those that are, we'll call them undertakers, and those that are midwives to the new story. And part of the midwifery of the new story is to lovingly hold space for, and even as the Keener would, give permission to those that have been repressing their rage and their depression and their anxiety, and release it into give it back to the ancestors, give it back to. So the beauty of the Dagara, which you are a master in and I'm initiated in, is this relationship with the ancestors. And I'm wondering if you could kind of bring some mythological lens to this moment and the healing of every generation that has come before and every that comes after. This is a moment for us, and this scream might come through people's art, might come through their throat, but in some way we have to get this out. Your thoughts?
It feels to me that we have been waiting for this moment for thousands of years. For thousands of years, like a long, long time. And, my mother died of colon cancer when I was 15. And I wrote a story about it. She had a tumor the size of a grapefruit. And I said, inside that tumor lived everything my mother could not say, could not do, could not be, could not rage, could not say, I've had fucking enough of being violated by the patriarch, by my husband, she couldn't do it. And it turned in on itself. Yeah. And so I do this work. The work that I do is for healing the ancestral lineage. And it goes back and forth, that if one woman can do a ritual and go down to the ocean or climb to a mountain top or build a big fire and have the tears and the rage and the sorrow her mothers could not have, then yes, it's a tsunami of change. It's a tsunami of all of us coming together and saying, I'm here to be in my power. I'm here to do what my mother couldn't do and my grandmother, my great-grandmother. I can do it now. And some women can't do it. So we help them do it best we can. We have the freedom in this country for our voice. And that's what we're fucking voting for, this election. And some women don't have that freedom still. And that's, to me, who Kamala is she is giving women the voice, the power to do what many could not do.
I love the bottom line of all of the sound bites that have come forward. We're not going back. We're not going back. We are going forward. And this is going to be good for the masculine as well as the feminine, because the masculine has suffered. I know your husband, Alan, who's a dear soul for me in my world as well, he spent the last 30 years in men's circles because they too have a deep longing to be through with this story.
Of course. Yeah, everybody was sacrificed. Everybody was sacrificed for this illusion of a dream that was only meant for a few, and the real dream to me, Edie, why you would even want to have that primal scream is to open up. And I say the promise we made before we were ever born to bring our beauty and our gifts to the world and reweave it with all of creation. Right. That's the whole point is, to get to that source of your soul, of your purpose, of your I'm here to keep that promise that I made before I was born. And then to have people help you remember what that promise is. And, that's one of the rituals that I do. It's called the holy recognition. After that primal scream, after that dance, then women stand and the circle of women look at them and go, I see you. I see your magnificence. I see all you have sacrificed to bring this beauty into the world. And we give a recognition of, and I welcome you home.
I think of Anita Diamant's book, The Red Tent, and how that book even before I sort of stepped out of the mainstream and into what some would consider the land of woo, where I began to find my beauty. My post scream, I began to really question all of the scaffolding of fear that had held my life together up to a point, but that scaffolding becomes a cage and a restrictive way of living. And when you break out of that, you move into this space of I don't know who I am and I don't know how to be. We don't have rituals in Western society that acknowledge our move from what are the stages from maiden to queen to crone. We don't have anything like that. And your work for what 40 years now has been offering that, witnessing that holy recognition to others to know that this is the evolution of soul. This is the maturation of soul process that we're meant to go through. We aren't meant to flounder in our lost innocence and our woundedness forever. That I think about the biblical references of wandering in the desert for 40 years. That's a metaphor for the first 40 years of our lives until we reach that place of reconciliation. I call it the beckoning of our becoming, and there's a reckoning in that beckoning, and the scream is a part of that reckoning. And on the other side of that, I had a beautiful experience with a sister in a medicine circle where my primal scream was overtaking the room, and I had a moment of ego and I'm destroying everybody else's experience. But then it was so, like you described, out of body. It was beyond my control. And there was an even more sentient awareness that it was in service to the moment. And another woman came and began to meet my scream, and our screams came together into this song. It was this, as it turns out, she's a Ikaros singer in ayahuasca circles, and it was like she came over and grabbed my scream and then tuned it into this harmonic beauty that was beyond my understanding of what my voice could do. And so I felt like she was guiding me through the scream to the song that we're here to sing. And I feel like that's where we're at as a human species, that we have a song to sing, and there's a bit of a clearing of the phlegm, a clearing of the pipes, a clearing of the chakras, all from root to tip, that have to take place to really. And you said something early on, and this is tender territory. Not everybody is comfortable to walk, but I know you are. When you mentioned downloads earlier and insights and wisdom, and part of the Dagra medicine that you opened me up for in 2015 was this access to wisdom, access to higher self, collective conscious, ancestors, however people need to frame the source of it. But there is a wisdom that is available to us that can guide us in even the most challenging and difficult moments that we have coming up ahead. Like, how do we rebuild a world that has a lot of broken parts to it? And we have to do it from that higher state of awareness. Lay it out, woman. Like, this, you've navigated this for a long time.
The word for me is not higher personally, because I'm a little like, I like transmutation to transformation. So for me, the primal scream is part of the transmutation. You're mutating in, like the snake
Right.
that sheds its skin. And then that transformation to transcendence is a part of it, because I think part of our culture is always trying to transcend instead of going down into the deep depths of the wisdom of the middle of the earth, which is part of the shamanic journey, is that you have to go deep into the Mother Earth. That's where the soul retrieval work is. That's where you call upon your animal spirit guides, and you go down there to meet your demons, to, like all of that. And then you come back and you bring that soul piece back with you. That's the journey of the transcendence. The transformation is now, what do you do with all of this shadow shit that you've had to face, you've had to work with? How are you transmuting that energy into beauty? And it's a bit like alchemy. It's taking the base material and turning it into gold. And that's the journey. And we have all of these helpers, and that's the unfathomable mystery of it. And that was part of the journey of going to Africa, was to go to the motherland, to encounter these beings. In Africa, they call them cantonles. In Ireland, they're the little people, the nature spirits, and they have a voice. And sometimes they need the humans to speak through. And that's part of my initiation and journey, was to say, yes, I allow my body to become this hollow bone, to speak an ancient tongue that somebody has been waiting to hear for thousands of years. I have to be clear, I'm not Dagara. I was blessed to learn from a Dagara teacher, Malidoma Somé, but what Malidoma did was he woke up my old ancient indigenous ancestral knowing. And that's what I do with other people. He gave me a beautiful gift, a tool of the divination cloth. But what's coming through me is not African. It's my ancestors who knew the little people, who knew the wisdom of plants and trees and mountain and sky and stars. And so it's to wake up my own indigenous knowing. And I don't know if that answered your question, Edie.
But you're weaving, so it's all perfect. I was at a gathering of women at Esalen. Oh gosh, it's been 6 or 7 years now. And I was sitting in circle with a Native American elder grandmother. And I remember I had just come out of the initiation process with you. And I was walking so tenderly, my very white skin, very privileged skin, into this conversation of appropriation and what's right and what's not. And I said, I am humbled that I have an opportunity to learn. And how do those of us who have such a long separation from our indigenous roots walk back to that place? And she says, you just described it. You go back to your roots. And so she says, what's your lineage? And I said, well, I'm Irish and Swedish. And there was a woman right next to me, and she leaned into my shoulder and she goes, I knew you were Sammy. I knew you were Sammy from the minute you walked in the door. And it was the first time, kind of like that holy recognition moment, where somebody from my lineage looked at me and said, I know your medicine. I know your energy. I know. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, I can honor Native American. I can honor African. I can honor Peruvian. I can honor all of the indigenous. And ultimately, although we may have named it, labeled it, organized differently around all of these, some would call them pagan truths, engagement with nature and the spirits, we're all coming from the same place. And so going back to my Sami roots, going back to my Celtic roots. I honor what you're saying. You
Yes.
know, you didn't go to become a dog or a shaman. You didn't go to become an African channeler, diviner. You went to learn
Yeah.
how to map it for yourself. And I feel like that's
Yeah.
all we can do is help people trust their own breadcrumbs to the soul path to find their own medicine. And I think there's a hunger for that. And I'm sure you see it more than I do in your.
Yes, I'm getting ready to teach another year-long divination training, and I wasn't going to teach another one, but there were so many people that said, you know, I want to come home, and I think you can help me navigate that journey. And so, you know, how can I deny spirit? You know, it's like show up again, show up
I
again.
remember. Oh, I'm
And
sorry. Please continue, please.
and it's, you know, when I gather these women, I go, you know, we are all medicine women. I'm not coming here as some great teacher. You know, we wake up each other's remembering. You know, you all have been on this journey. You all have done so much, and you've got a beautiful medicine basket. And we put these medicine baskets together and we go on the journey. But I don't put myself as, you know, I'm the teacher. You're going to teach me as much as I'm going to teach you. And yeah, that's important to me. It's really important.
I'm circling back around to a moment, and I'm past it, well past it now, but my daughter Meredith really brought it into conversation with me. She said there was a moment when Joe Biden stepped down and passed the baton to Kamala Harris, and I had a moment of internal misogyny where I went through the thought process of, oh my gosh, are we ready for a woman? Do we have enough support for this thing to happen? Because there is a lot of, I won't even call it political, I'll just call it energetic shift happening across the planet now. And is she strong enough, powerful enough? And after about 5 minutes, I was like, yes, she is. And I recognized that I went through that same process on my own for myself. Like I came from a very religious background, 35 years in a very Christian oriented upbringing, where the people who had access to revelation were the masculine, not the feminine. And so it's taken me, and I'm sure it'll be a lifetime of really exploring this for myself, but to stop gaslighting myself about my intuition, to stop gaslighting myself about my power is the wrong word, but capacity to engage with the mystery at a level that makes life really interesting. Right?
Yes. You know, I mean, the Sibyls in Greece, the seers, the soothsayers, diviners, they were all women. And then, you know, the gods came in, Zeus and all of them, and destroyed all these shrines and took that medicine and made it into their own. So, you know, a lot of us had to become fathers, daughters in order to survive in this world, in order to succeed. And we had to sacrifice our inner feminine. You know, that's Athena. You know, Athena was Zeus's favorite daughter. And she sacrificed other women in the name of her father. But we're at a place we can't do that anymore. And that, to me, is the women that are following Trump are still living that story of sacrificing themselves and their sisters in the name of the father. And that shit is over.
Or dying in and what I,
for me, it is over. You know, no more sacrificing yourself in the name of the father.
This healing of the mother wound, this healing of the sister wound,
is big work for me, because I come from that very patriarchal sacrifice of self in the name of the Father. Father knows best. I went through many years of not trusting my feminine depth, and it's, I think I, for the last 5 years, maybe 10, that has been a really intense focus for me, is to heal my feminine and to trust my medicine, to trust my intuition, to trust my capacity to engage with the mystery. And I think I want so badly to just have my arms wide open and welcome all the sisters home, all the mothers home, all the daughters home, and not to the exclusion of the masculine, but we have they've got work to do too. They've got to heal their brother wound and their competition wound and their domination wound. And, but there is something very pressing right now for the feminine to open her arms and welcome. I'm about to do a TikTok live, and I'm always thinking, what is the conversation that I want to conjure in that space? And it occurs to me that I wonder if men really realize how much women have been made into enemies of each other, just for their attention, for their, we recently had a gathering on our land of ecstatic dance. And it's the first time we really opened up to the masculine and the feminine in a container where that is the focus. And one of the conversations that came forward, we did an integration the next morning, and the women were like, there was a point at which I wasn't sure I could fully engage with my hips in a communal dance space, because I didn't want to be suggestive. I didn't want to. And one of the men started to cry a little bit. And he said, it really breaks my heart that you felt like you had to edit who you are, that you had to diminish your sensual, exotic beauty in order to feel safe. And then he said, and I felt the same. I felt like if I used my hips, if I moved my body the way it wanted to move, that could be interpreted as suggestive or oppressive. So I'm really coming into awareness and holding space for this unfolding of masculine and the feminine coming together. Your thoughts on all that?
Oh, I've always had this thought, Edie, what if women were born into the world where they could fully embody all of it? Never had to filter it. They never had to be afraid. They could fully embody the power of their sensual, sexual, erotic bodies and see what gets created from that. Imagine a world where every woman on this planet could walk knowing that she could embody that sensuality, and it wasn't going to be dangerous or taken
or
from
shamed
her,
for it,
or shamed, and that you then were able to come together with the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine, and those two energies that is what Eros is. That is the erotic life force. That is the sacred marriage. That is what these two energies come together, and they create universes. So I've always feels like someplace, sometime that did happen, but it's been a long
time coming.
Long time, and a long time coming. So I know what it feels like in my body. And that's been part of who I am, and my teaching is to give women permission. And the truth is, Edie, it's only been done in women's groups.
Yeah.
It's only been, for me, full permission. It's only been done in women's groups.
I think that's why I'm dabbling in the possibility that so we built this year, and we call it Grace Sanctuary, and it's a very feminine round with even the big oculus at the top. People look up and go, that's the great vagina in the sky, right? So it's a very feminine space. And then 2 years ago, I was called to build a very masculine, very upright, erected temple right next. So there was this balance between the masculine and the feminine spaces. And the night before we were to bring our community together to create that masculine space, I thought, I have 30 people coming tomorrow, universe. I'm following the thread. I'm listening and trusting and following the breadcrumbs here, and all the synchronicities had lined up. But how do I bring them into this vision of the masculine and feminine healing? And I got this beautiful, rich, multifaceted download that the healed feminine can offer the masculine grace for all that has come before, and the healed masculine shows up and offers the feminine hope for the future. It's like the feminine forgives and offers grace for everything that has come before, and the masculine steps up and helps us build the future going forward. And on a political spectrum, I was looking at Tim Walz as an archetype, and Doug Emhoff. I mean, let's just honor him. Both of them, they both have understood, and so many of the other men who are up on the stage this week, and I hear them speaking out now, how to show up as a healed masculine in support of the feminine. And young men are watching this and learning from this.
Yes. And what a beautiful reflection than what we've had from the other side about what it is to be a man.
And how much they suffered in that separation from self, in the very thing that they want. What's that Madonna whore complex they want to put women into? And I even some of the commentary about Kamala Harris is it demeans them more than it does her, because we know better. But it's this, they wanted us to stay a certain way forever, and we're not behaving, Rita. Well, what are they going to do with us?
Good gracious. Well, and that's when you have that primal scream. Like they kept us locked down and put in a little box for a long time. And then when that primal scream, and then when you have a whole world, you can't hold that energy back. I mean, it's bigger than that story of sacrifice. So there is I do believe there is a rebirth.
I'm touched by the words of the Dalai Lama, where he said that the Western women will heal the world. And maybe that's because we have a lot of power now. We have a lot of economic power. And we can begin to shift the tide of what it means to live on this planet in a harmonious way. So where do you see this? Okay, we're in the, how are we going to navigate the rough waters here? What are your thoughts on that? Because it's going to get rough before it gets.
Yes. How are we going to navigate the rough waters together? Together. We can't do it alone. You have to have your allies. You have to have your support systems. You have to have a place to go and have the primal scream, and the place to grieve and cry and dance and celebrate, and all of it, together is how, and that's so beautiful. That's what you're doing. For me, my primal scream is through my art. Like if I'm painting Lilith right now. Lilith is coming through very strong for me, and I'm writing about Lilith. And Lilith was the one that refused to lie underneath Adam. She was the first wife of Adam, and they were both born from the earth. She was not taken from Adam's rib. And she says, hell no, I ain't laying underneath you. And then the story comes, Adam went and complained to God, and God said, well, we're going to send, demons after you, and every child that's ever born is going to be turned into a demon. So for me right now, let's make sacred the demons, because the demons can then devour the shit that needs to be devoured to make way for this new world that is being born.
And maybe there.
So I'm
calling in Lilith.
Lilith.
You're the third person this week I've heard reference to Lilith. So she's in the field, and she's claiming her power to no longer be under the power. We stand side by side, or we do not stand. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I was researching last night, Kamala's mother, I believe I'm saying this, Shamala.
I believe you are.
I'm saying it right. Her name also, it's a hummingbird. Her name is connected to the goddess Durga, which was, she's a warrior, Indian warrior goddess. So she's the one that raised these daughters to be who they are. So, bowing to Durga.
Kamala means lotus.
Durga.
So she'll be the lotus POTUS,
right,
which I think is fabulous.
Right. Did you make that up?
I stole it from every other smart person who's been putting it out there. But if you think of the lotus, so let's just lean into the mythology of this moment. The lotus comes up through the mud to the surface to finally blossom. And I honestly don't know that what we're experiencing right now could have happened any other way, except the way it did happen with Elder Biden stepping aside and handing the mantle of authority to the feminine. I don't know that if she had been the pick from the start, we would be where we are. There is something about the quickening of this that fits the feminine model. Like we labor and we labor and we labor, and then there's an acceleration, a quickening at the end, and there's no turning back. There, the birthing process has begun, and we're moving through something.
Yeah, I was writing about it before President Biden, stepped down, and I said, it's time for the old king to die. Mythically, I mean, we're in mythic territory.
Yes.
So this is, these rituals have been going on for thousands of years, where the old king has to be sacrificed to the divine feminine. And that's totally what happened, is that the old king had to die. Divine feminine is rising.
My work has been about a sort of mapping people from their woundology to the mythology of their story, from looping around the why and the blaming and shaming of our past and our parents, to engaging with the myth of your life, the hero's journey in Joseph Campbell's language, the mythology of your story. Well, if you overlay that notion of woundology to mythology, I believe that's what we're seeing across the planet right now. We're living in mythological times, and you have to engage at that level to really understand and not be hijacked by the commotion and the tantruming and the energies that are going to want to go back. There is no going back from this.
Yeah, I know. And it comes back to the unfathomable mystery of it all. But to be a part of the mystery, to engage with it, to dance with it, to co-create with it, this is what we get to do, right? And there's something in my heart that I really want to just bring forth, and I wanted to bring it forth a while back. But I want to make sacred all of the women that can't access the primal scream. Yeah. It's easy for, me, or maybe some of us that might be able to at this point in our lives. But I have worked with so many women who can't access that voice, and this is the story. If I open that up, I may never stop screaming. I open that up, I could die. And so that's part of my work and your work, is to go on the journey to slowly opening that up, whether it be whatever body work, through whatever the healing modality is. But I really want to make sacred to the women whose voices have not had permission to go to that gateway and open up. And I want to say to those women, you are not alone, and you are held. And I will hold you, and you will hold you. And, that's so important to me.
I honor and appreciate you bringing that forward, because that is, I believe, the butterfly effect that is happening right now, the ripples of each of us finding our voice, giving courage, encouragement to others to claim their voice. And I was reading yesterday, a woman, people in Europe are on pins and needles, in Canada, and all there, everybody's watching like, oh my God, what's going to happen in America right now? Everybody's like, because this is a cosmic expression that's being acted out here, and we're all playing our part. Even those that are playing the part of Undertaker to the old story are playing their role in this process. And the effect, the ripple effect, the seismic impact of the choices that we're making right now in this, how we show up, and the grace that we can offer everyone. I was really touched by how many people stood on the stage over the last week and said, I feel a big tent. I feel welcome here. I don't agree with all the policies, but I feel like for the first time that we can work it out. It isn't a right and wrongness. In the end, we all want a more safe, secure, equal footing for everyone to have. So I've never in my lifetime, 65 years, felt this level of hope and possibility. And I've been always sort of a hope peddler. You know me that way. Like, I'm doing my best to keep the plate spinning. Like, hey, look over there, there's good things happening. Look over here, there's good things. But to feel like we can look around the room and go, we got this. I feel that for the first time in my life. It's inspiring to be here now.
And if we look at it mythically, the shadow had to rise up. The darkness had to rise up. All of the veils had to be ripped away. And we knew we were facing what had always been there, but nobody, Trump gave permission for everybody's shadow to come up. And in facing that shadow, then this, fierceness of the feminine can then come forth and go, okay, I'm a prosecutor.
And there's enough healed masculine on the planet now, healed men who recognize this moment of camaraderie, because they too have suffered under the old story of fear and scarcity, and we're birthing a story of love and abundance. We can do that. Feminine knows how to birth shit. We're good at this.
That's why they're so afraid of us. We can give life, and we can take life. And that's how powerful we are. And that is the original primal scream birth cry.
Oh, that feels like we just went around the universe and came back to this moment. So, my dear crone, Reda, what's the role of the crone in this moment? There'll be a lot that'll hear this message, and we are the grandmothers. We are the holders of wisdom. What's our role right now?
To not be afraid. to not be afraid. We're the crone, we can speak what others cannot speak. We're standing on the precipice of the threshold of death. That we have faced death many times, and we're closer physically than the young ones. So we can be willing to sacrifice ourselves so others can live. That we can pull from the depths and the belly of the caves the wisdom that has gone before us, and voice it and speak it and bless it. And when you see another crone, to welcome her and thank her for all the sacrifices that she has gone through to bring this wisdom to this moment in time. That we are in service to something so much larger than ourselves or even our individual families, that we're in service to creation and rebirth. Because that is the cycle. Death, birth, rebirth, and goes on and on.
When I was a little girl, I wasn't great at math, but for whatever reason, I became fixated on how old I would be when I was in the year 2020. That 2000 meant nothing to me. Y2K was a non-event. And then I would be 62 in the year of 2020. And it was like, 62 is a boring, that's not a big one. What's the, and as we got closer to 2020, I kept getting this hit that we were going to go through a leveling event, a sort of a recalibration of our interconnectedness. We would begin to recognize that your unwellness becomes my unwellness. And in that beautiful paradoxical way, your well-being becomes my well-being. And I feel like we went through this portal. A shift began with COVID, and that we did not do a very good job of managing the well-being of others during that time. And I have the sense that it will take women in leadership to navigate a lot of the leveling events that are coming through climate, through migration, through food shortages. Like our way of being on this planet is going to go through radical recalibration. And it's going to take an indigenous view. It's going to take a wisdom view, not a consumptive, greedy view that will get us through this. And so for my lens, in addition to all the beauty you just shared about the role of the crone, it's a roll up my sleeves time too. Like the things I know, the things I can teach matter now, to pass on the wisdom to the young ones.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, that's how it's been for, the grandmothers. And I'm so blessed to be a grandmother, and I'm blessed to track the wisdom of this young little girl already, and to bless her wisdom that one day maybe she'll do the same thing. So, it's one of the greatest honors of my life is to be a grandmother.
It's the best.
Truly.
It
is. And one more thing I want to say too is just honoring the masculine, honoring the feminine, but also honoring all of the spaces in between that. All of the mystery that lives in between, not getting into binaries and polarities, that there's so much richness in the field there, just bowing to our queer folk and our trans folk and all of it, that to make sure that we're not just saying masculine, feminine, male, female, but that just the richness that lives in all of those dimensions.
I agree. I part of my work is teaching Dr. Hawkins' map of consciousness, and the lower portion of that map is all about fear and scarcity and a God who is vengeful and angry, and as a result, you spend your life, afraid of what's going to happen when you die, and you move above a certain threshold, and then everything that was black and white, good or evil, becomes very nuanced, very non-binary. It isn't black and white. I'm looking out my window to my gorgeous view that I've had for 22 years, and there is no black and white. We are meant to express both individually.
Yes.
I think of the non-binary shift we're making in terms of intelligence and neurospiciness, and we're finally beginning to
Yes.
soften
Yeah.
into the appreciation of each of our unique expressions. Yeah.
Yes, 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 yes. The diversity of it all, and to go to nature to have that primal scream. Do you think the monkey is worried about, the monkey is
You're like, oh, I shouldn't.
like
No, no, no.
yeah, crows that have been like, that they don't think about it, It's just, it's so
Time to
nature
get
is our
loud.
teacher.
It's time. It's
Time
time.
to get loud. I'm proud and I'm
Oh,
loud.
Miss Rita, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. I love your art, and I'm going to post on our website, primalscream.com, primalscreampodcast.com, how to find you and your beautiful Bone Woman art, outsider art, so others can step into the depths that you travel to bring that visionary art forward for us. And you have brought visionary art forward in me, my dear sister. Thank you so much for being a part of this and being a part of my life.
Thank you, Edie, and thank you for all that you do for reweaving the web and bringing everybody into that and everything.
I feel like
we
were made for these times. And here we are.
May it
be so. Love you too.
Yeah, I love
Let me
you.
just